I've known Bruce for a long time up there on campus, so it'll be a great opportunity for you to learn some of the science basis for hemp cultivation in the state. So I won't take any longer. I'll dim the lights and let you get at it.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So I'm Bruce Bugbee. Early in my career, I was fortunate enough to, as a young scientist, to get funded by NASA. And that work with NASA's interested in growing plants to feed people away from the Earth, especially on Mars. We're going to have a space farm on Mars. And NASA has a long-term program to feed people on Mars and on the moon and all that stuff. So I thought that would probably define my career, but cannabis came along, and it's a high-value crop grown in controlled environments with high inputs and high outputs. And starting several years ago, some of the big growers in places like Kentucky and Colorado and North Carolina said, we would like to fund your lab to work on cannabis research. And universities are really eager to get money coming into the university. So I went to the university and I said, look, these people want to fund our research. Can we take the money? And they said, no, it is federally illegal. We get $1 billion from the federal government for all kinds of things. We do not want to cross the federal government. You can't take the money. So the growers asked again the next year, but on about February 23rd, the Farm Bill passed, signed by Trump, and about 2 minutes later, I talked to legal counsel for the university, and they said, okay, in our legal opinion, it's now safe to take the money. So these growers started funding research in my laboratory at the university, and off we went. This was about a little over a year ago that we started to do this. My laboratory at the university specializes in controlled environments, so where we can control everything. Some of my students say the plants in this lab never see the sun and they never touch soil. And that's so we can control everything and get definitive answers to what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to go talk to you about some overview things in our research at the university, and I'll take a few questions at the end of this, and then my colleague, Mitchell Westmoreland, is going to talk to you more about the details of the research we do. So this slide shows you that we've been in this business a long time. This came from the University Library's special collections. I was told they had a huge section on Utah State University hemp research from the 1930s. It was legal. And back then, it was win the war, grow hemp, the Navy needs the rope. It was a patriotic thing to be growing hemp because of the rope. People weren't thinking about the medicinal values. We were still a half a century away from having low THC lines. So this was all for hemp. So that's, and I think this picture was also taken before baseball caps were invented, because you had to have that certain kind of hat. You see the guy on the left-hand side with that hat too. And if we took this now, you can tell everybody'd have a baseball cap. So that was 1931, when we had field plots, enormous cannabis plants, all for the fiber. And there's a rich history of optimizing hemp for fiber production. Now we fast forward to our lab now. Now we're doing it for medical reasons, and we're extracting the compounds, as you all know. So the research environment has changed enormously. We have sophisticated genetic tools that we didn't have. We had analytical tools we didn't have. If you go to the library and read these reports from the people doing the work in 1931, they knew you could get high from marijuana. So there's a quote from a guy, and he says, I stayed in my office all afternoon smoking the leaves of this hemp, and I did not get the least bit high, as would be expected if it was marijuana. And I'm thinking, wow, I guess they didn't have HPLC invented yet either. The guy had to smoke it in his lab to see if it was high THC or not. So, some of this is review, but it's review so we're all on the same page. One of the things that we aspire to do at universities is provide a very solid basis for all the students. In the world of cannabis production, hemp and marijuana, as everybody in this room knows, there is a plethora of claims. There are magic fertilizer companies. There are magic everything. There's magic genetics. At a university, we're not selling anything except knowledge. So we're trying to test all those claims. And after a year of testing, how about this? How about this? And we fall back on the basic principles of plant production. If something says it's magic, it's probably bogus, almost always bogus. You've got to go back on the principles. I get so many emails from people, how do I do this? How do they fertilize water, et cetera, et cetera. I have a link in my emails. It said here, I have a one-purpose, all-purpose link that will help you get answers to all of your problems. Click here. And they click that link, and a big screen opens up, and it says, apply to USU. And it's a little bit rude, but it's true. I mean, I can't tell you in 10 minutes the answer to your questions. You've got to study the principles. So if any of you or your kids are interested, send them to us. We'll give them a solid background, and they can make the jump to light speed in this business. So this, I think everybody knows this, is just a review. The analogy that I have used is hemp and marijuana is like field corn and sweet corn. You can't tell them apart, and in that case, you've got to taste it, and then you can tell. And field corn and sweet corn are only separated by one gene, and that's the case with hemp and marijuana as well, very closely related. And I'll get into this later, but even if we ate some high THC lines, let's say we were in the field with super high THC lines, and we decided we needed a little break from the stress of the day, so we started to eat some flowers, what would happen? Let me ask you, what would happen if we started to eat those flowers in the field? A real high THC? Nothing. What the hell? Nothing's going to happen. It's because the plant doesn't make THC. It makes THC the acid form. It has to be heated to become psychoactive. And I'll show you a slide of that in a minute. Here's the key. There's 3 subspecies. These aren't different species. They're subspecies. Everything's cannabis sativa, and then we have 3 subspecies. Now, we can cross these easily and make all kinds of interesting hybrids because that's a definition of a species. You can hybridize one species with the same thing, so we can easily hybridize these subspecies. But the whole thing is cannabis sativa, whether it's marijuana or hemp. These are a couple of maps off the internet. This one is one of the more recent. We're pretty much universally legal in the United States now for hemp production. There's only 4 states in this map left that are gray, and those are the states where it's still currently illegal, but even those 4 states say pending legislation. And of course, Idaho, we're right up the road. What we're doing at Utah State University would be illegal, 22 miles to the north of us. But this is an amazing map because a couple of years ago, I don't know when we passed 50% of the states becoming legal, but it wasn't that long ago. This is, and a lot of these legal issues we talked about this morning are going to evaporate quickly when this becomes more universally legal. Margie, weren't you asking about mailing it to people and where are you going to mail it? And I think that question's going to go away pretty quickly. Here's why it became legal in Utah. We strategized as a state. We paraded mothers with kids with epilepsy in front of legislatures, and the question was, do you want us to keep going to Colorado to buy this illegally, or are you going to arrest me, or are you going to make it legal? And our legislature made it legal. It was a bit of a surprise to people across the United States because you don't think Utah is going to be that progressive in leading the nation, but in this case we are. This is an actual photo from a press conference at the state capitol. That's how it happened not long ago. This is what we were doing a few years before that. And this is from a drone photo. So you don't see this plot much anymore. This is acres under cultivation, and this map isn't completely updated because it shows no data for Utah. But the point I want to make here is that Colorado, right next to us, and Oregon, right next to us, this has been legal for a much longer time, and there are many acres under cultivation, and we have a network of universities, of agriculture schools that collaborate with each other. Oregon State's Ag School is in Corvallis. And of course, Colorado State's is in Fort Collins, Colorado State University. We are working with those states in a joint effort to better understand this new crop because of its potential for agriculture. It's one of the great things about education because we're not selling anything except knowledge. The universities work together, the scientists work together on this. And we have benefited a lot from scientists in these other states. Interestingly enough, our funding comes from growers. We have one grower in Utah Brian Gold, who's going to be with us on a panel in a minute. But we have growers in Kentucky that are funding our research. We have growers in Colorado that are funding our research. And it's because we specialize in controlled environments and this kind of research. It's been gratifying to people come up and they say, oh, nice to meet you. And all they know is my videos. I might have 20 or 30 videos on, it's sort of like how to grow plants. About 3 weeks ago, I recorded one video that's just called Cannabis 101. And I understand that's been getting a few thousand hits a day. So there's a big hunger for this kind of information. And if you type my name and cannabis or hemp or something, I'm sure you'll find all those videos online. Here's some pricing. Now, Ryan Larson talked to us about this too. And I like this graph. Look at the sinking line. You all know this. If you're growing it, you know the reality of this. This comes from a website called Hemp Benchmarks. And I found that website to be really good. It comes out monthly, and it takes the pulse of the nation for the value of hemp. This is where this data comes from. But let's focus on this top part up here. So July, $20 a pound, that number has sunk to in the neighborhood of $5 a pound. Depends on the amount of THC, but it's dropped dramatically. But look at our other crops. Wheat and alfalfa, whoa. Even at $5 a pound, we are still way more valuable than those other crops. Now, those other crops, we have mechanized harvesters, we have a mature industry, you can be sure you're going to be able to sell your crop. There's a whole bunch of differences, but the yields of these three crops are similar, the yield per acre. The difference is because we don't have herbicides for hemp, few insecticides, it's basically all organic. You got a hand weed. The input costs for hemp are much, much higher than they are for these other crops, but still, look at the value. I predict these are going to eventually start to come together, the value of these crops. That 26 billion, which Ryan also mentioned, that comes from multiple sources, is the value of an anticipated value of hemp in the next few years. We see so many places to use hemp. It's not just medical, but it's the fiber, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that we anticipate, not we, because I'm not an economist, many economists predict an enormous value of hemp. So one of my pieces of advice is, it's no surprise, this is ultra risky, but hang in there. If you get good at it, you could emerge a winner in the whole thing if you can stay in business long enough to weather all the storms. So just to review, we've got medical and industrial hemp. Now, the terminology in these is terrible. All of us have licenses to grow industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is what we were growing in the 30s to make rope. And Patagonia and many other high outlet places sell hemp clothing. And I'm told, do you think Carhartt is rugged? Try hemp pants, man. Those go forever. They're really, really rugged. I think we're going to see a lot more hemp clothing, but right now it's low value. That is industrial hemp. What we are doing, and I think almost everybody in here, is medical hemp. People say medical marijuana. That's high THC marijuana, but we're not growing it. Few of us are growing it for fiber. We're growing it for medical purposes. And so my students, they're worried about what their parents are going to think. They're studying cannabis. And I tell them, just tell your parents you're working on botanical medicines. And oh, that's great. You know, everybody loves botanical medicines. So that's what we should tell people. And we should tell the state legislature, you're not against botanical medicines, are you? That's because that's what this is, a naturally produced medicine. There's the molecule, CBD. It's a small molecule. Here's fiber. I gave a talk last year at Texas A&M University in West Texas. It's a huge agriculture school, and they're surrounded by cotton fields. And the whole conversation is, what are we going to do for the cotton industry? We're pumping down the Ogallala Aquifer. We're going to run out of water. And so they were super interested in switching from cotton to hemp. This is millions of acres of cotton production. They can see the writing on the wall. They got to get a different crop. And they're really interested in hemp. And here's the reason. Look at the fiber lengths, just incredible. You get up to a 6 centimeter long cotton shirt, you're paying $300 for that shirt because the long cotton fibers are so valuable. So there's the reason. Here's a backyard mill for doing this. Now, Ryan brought me, you know what this is? Hemp, of course. Hemp insulation to replace fiberglass insulation has the potential to be superior. You can come up, Ryan's got tons of samples. Here's a book of fabrics all made with hemp. I mean, it's got tremendous potential as a fiber. That's down the road, and it's going to be different kinds of, different genetics to get there, but there's great potential in that. I think you've all seen this. You can look this up on the internet. Here's the key compounds in the cannabinoids. It's a closely related family of compounds that cause all the medical effects. And if you look at those little structures, if you recognize those, that means you had a class in organic chemistry. And if you had an advanced class in organic chemistry, you can quickly see the differences in those little B-shaped hexagons up there. They're subtle differences. They've all got purported medical benefits. The plants all synthesize these. We work on selecting lines that make more of some and less of others. But there's a key point here. Remember that we chewed on cannabis and we didn't get high. That is because the plant makes the bottom compound here called THCA. I think a lot of you know this, but and that little red section that I've drawn, and it's in chemistry, this is called a carboxyl group. That group attached to the molecule means the molecule, it doesn't do anything in human physiology. But as soon as we warm it a little bit, that falls off and we get THC. This is true for all of the cannabinoids, CBG, CBD, CBN. The plant always makes the acid form and then it decarboxylates later. And this has led to some confusion about testing. And it's even a matter in testing because guess what? The bottom compound weighs 13% more than the top. So we got to correct for that when we do analysis. And if you're at 0.29% THC, you got to know which form is being reported, whether it's the THC active form or the THCA form. There's competition for this. The value of this is so great. Some of our geneticist colleagues are working to put the genes in bacteria and yeast. If they are successful, we could make CBD, we can make all these cannabinoid compounds without growing whole plants. That doesn't mean it will be cheaper than field production. We've got a lot of drugs that are not necessarily cheaper to make in the lab, they're cheaper to grow them. But this is just a commentary on people working on less expensive ways to make cannabinoids. We can't chemically synthesize them. They have to be synthesized by another living organism, like bacteria or yeast. But this is going on, and we'll see. This is years away, but it has the potential to make lower cost cannabinoid compounds. All right, now we're into the key part of this. If we're going medical hemp, we do not want seeds. They, as much as they're great for human nutrition, they have low CBD, low THC. We want only female flowers, unpollinated, to get the highest quality, the highest concentrations. So these are things that if you're in this business, you know them, but there's a female plant that's so desirable, all flowers. Here's a male plant, plenty of pollen sacs coming out. And in the field, we're trying to get rid of all the males, have only females. That's okay. We also have what we call hermaphrodites, which means a female flower with one little anther escaping right there. And that anther can pollinate hundreds of nearby female flowers. So not only are male plants bad, hermaphrodites are bad. And I think lots of you are well aware of this, but even if you're a vigilant observer and you get rid of your male plants, you got to be real careful about hermaphrodites in the field. The word on the street is stress increases hermaphrodism. And in the principles of plant biology, that is a good hypothesis. It probably does increase hermaphrodism. That's one of the things that we're studying now in the laboratory is what kinds of stress cause it and how much stress, how can we minimize hermaphrodism, but we don't want any pollen. So industrial doesn't matter because we're growing it for fiber. The seeds are fine. Medical, it matters, only female crops. This is just a review slide. Now, there's a group here talking about, there's two ways to get cannabis, feminized seed or clones. And the temptation, look at the difference in price. Clones per seed, maybe $1 per seed, but clones are more expensive. So that means there's a great temptation to plant from seed, the way we do with other things. If we need only female plants, how can we get seed that's 100% female? We treat the plant with hormones. Silver thiosulfate, 1-MCP is a variety of hormones we can use, and it makes the plants produce some pollen, and you can have a plant pollinate itself and have a feminized seed. That's what this is. The problem is, as we've discovered, I put 99.95% females, but per acre, that means somewhere in that acre, there's 3 to 6 male plants, and you got to find them and get them out of there. And I know some of you have done great jobs walking the field, but boy, you don't want any escapes. That's a big trick. One of the things we also know about seed propagated plants is they get this thing called inbreeding depression. When a plant pollinates itself, it happens in people too, or communities that are inbreed. You get inbreeding depression and lack of hybrid vigor. It's the opposite of hybrid vigor. That happens with seed propagation. And then there's evidence from big growers that there's a higher percentage of hermaphroditic plants and hermaphrodite flowers in there. Meanwhile, if we grow from clones, you're guaranteed 100% females and excellent vigor. So my message here is be careful about feminized seed. There is a plethora of unscrupulous vendors out there that don't do a good job. They have higher percent males. Just be careful about it and consider clones where it's, even though they cost more up front, your chances of getting a good crop are much higher if you start from clones. This is how we grow tomatoes. We don't put tomato plants in the field from seed. They're too high value. We always grow them from clones. So there's a lot of crops that are high value that we always grow from clones. In Oregon, our colleagues at Oregon State put out this pamphlet, this white paper about pollen in the state of Oregon and how it's contaminated their cannabis crop. They have a big cannabis crop, and they call it the ethics of cannabis farming. If you search for this, you'll find it. There's the URL. Here's a map of Oregon with, this is a couple years old now, but it's the licensed producers, and those red circles are where the safety zone. They don't want any plants growing within 10 miles of their field that might be males that might make pollen. This is a real dangerous thing. We heard from J.D. Lawrenson this morning, attorney. In Oregon, there is lawsuits going on for people whose fields got contaminated with pollen from some other field where they had an escape, where they had a male plant. I don't know where the law is going to go, but this is a big challenge with getting rid of the pollen so that we got pure, high-quality female flowers. This middle plant is a female plant that got water stressed. Now, this isn't from our laboratory. This is in a field in Oregon. But that female plant produced a couple of male flowers, and it pollinated a whole bunch of plants around it. And there's one of the people that's funding us in Kentucky. That's one of his plants that he grew from clones. He didn't have any male plants, but pollen got into his crop somewhere, and he saw seeds. And I think those of you that done this, walk the fields, you got to be vigilant. You got to know carefully what you're looking for. There's an emerging female flower and an emerging male flower on the plants. This is my last slide. Back to the start. We are fortunate to have good funding to work on cannabis. We are working on the state legislature to fund us to do cannabis research. This is an important crop for Utah. And if you in this room don't grow this, I understand in Wendover, there's a big cannabis shop now. Have you heard about that? And you could drive over to the state line and buy it. Yeah, well, that's revenue lost for the state of Utah. And when you talk about revenue loss, the legislators listen carefully. You have to be successful to keep that revenue in the state. As a university, we have to help you be successful in doing this. Part of that is dispelling all the myths, and part of it's just doing high-quality research that the public can trust. So I'm going to stop here. I will take some questions, and then I'll introduce Mitch, who will show you some more of the research data that we are doing right now.